welcome to Combat Thoughts. I'm Robbie.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to take a deeper look at the culture and philosophy behind martial arts. I realised a little while ago that we accidentally nicked your entire podcast setup. I didn't realise this until I was listening to the one with Dan Hardy, and you were basically like, "Oh, the best place to start is at the beginning." So what we normally like to do is go through people's entire martial arts history or anything before that, and we'll riff off of anything interesting within there. So, Dan, could you start at the beginning?
Well, first, I'm sure that I'm not the first person to go with that format. You know, it's nothing particularly outside the box to go chronologically. In terms of my martial arts story, you know, it's not particularly exciting. I basically fumbled around with a few different martial arts as a teenager and found Japanese Jiu-Jitsu at 14, 15 years old. Long story short, at the time, Nick Brooks, who would become my Jiu-Jitsu instructor or my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor and continues to be to this day, he was a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu black belt co-owning this Mill Hill Jiu-Jitsu club. But by this time had already found the light, so to speak, of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling. So he'd stopped doing all of the rubbish traditional martial arts stuff, and he would just use the mat space to roll in the corner. One day comes along and the other instructor leaves and Nick takes over and slowly transforms the Mill Hill Jiu-Jitsu club into Mill Hill Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club. And that is how I got started.
Is that the one that's still running today?
It is still running today. Yeah, it is the same club, yeah.
No, I didn't realise that. I've never heard of a gym transitioning from traditional to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in that way before.
Yeah, that's what happened. It was a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu club, and Nick took over, and there was probably I'd say that there was a number of months period, somewhere between probably around about 6 month period, maybe a little bit less. You know how your time is distorted when you're a little bit younger. But there was a period of time where it was sort of a hybrid sort of thing. He'd do some Japanese Jiu-Jitsu stuff. We do a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff. We do some stick fighting, some knife fighting, everything. And then one day we were in the car. So he used to take me to train in Milton Keynes with a guy called Ebby. And Braulio used to go down there, and Victor used to go down there, and Octavio used to go down there. So that's where I was first really got into pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then one time on the way back, and it was just like, screw it, we're going to go full Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're going to get rid of everything else. And then it was Mill Hill BJJ.
What was the motivation for getting into martial arts in the first place? Were you out for blood, bullied as a child, one of the classic stories?
No, I can't say that I was bullied as a child. I just was really interested by it, you know. I think a lot of people train martial arts as a kid. You know, we're talking single digit age. I never did anything like that. My mum specifically was not keen on me doing any sort of martial arts or anything, or didn't like any violence. So when I got to my mid-teens, I got really interested in it and then wanted to go do it. So that's how I kind of got into it, through I think sometimes if you train when you're very young, the novelty can be taken away, and then you don't really have any interest to do it when you're older. But that didn't happen to me. So I was keen, I was interested. It was the early days of the internet, and I was researching stuff and watching Dragon Ball Z, and thought that I wanted to do some martial arts.
I was gonna say, like, what were there any people in particular that you gravitated towards? Because I know, like, for myself,
it's always Bruce Lee.
Yeah, Bruce Lee is obviously a big one.
Nope,
but
Goku.
I'm guessing for yourself, no. So Dragon Ball Z.
Ball Z. Yeah, I was never super into. Interestingly enough, I was never super into martial arts films massively. I was kind of more the Jackie Chan, Jet Li era. But yeah, I definitely say that Dragon Ball Z was a big motivator. I think I was maybe a touch too late for Bruce Lee. But yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah.
So what was the what were your goals with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Because I know you initially had an idea about MMA, but you never really took that up. So what happened there?
Yeah, so early on in me training, and I'm not sure exactly which came first. I think they came at pretty much the same time that I was started training, at least the Japanese jiu-jitsu stuff and probably the Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff as well. But around about that time, I started watching MMA, and the UFC used to play on. God damn it, I can't even remember what the channel was called now. It was when it used to be on Spike in America, and it used to be on. I can't remember what. Do you remember what channel the early UFC events were on?
In the UK?
In the UK, yeah.
This is before
I
my
don't know.
time. I got into it with McGregor, unfortunately. I'm one
Oh
of those.
man, are you serious? I didn't realize you were that late to the game. Yeah, the first
Yeah,
matches
man.
I remember watching was UFC. I think it was 35 Brawl in the Royal Albert Hall with God, it's late. Ian Freeman. Matt Hughes was my go-to guy. He was the champion at the time. He was beating people up. I remember watching the first Robbie Lawler versus Nick Diaz match, and Robbie was very early in his career there. He was very young, in his late teens or even early 20s. And he was one of my favorite fighters because the guy was just vicious, pretty much how he continued the rest of his career. So yeah, those are the days when I first started watching, and then I got really interested in Pride. And people don't realize that up until when Pride went bust in got to be the mid noughties, the UFC was considered the inferior organization. It's so hard to fathom a time where the UFC was not this global MMA monopoly, but Pride was very much considered. They would sell out arenas with 80, 90, 100,000 people in them. And, it was considered that all of the best fighters would be in Japan, and they would be paid way more. They'd be way more famous. They'd have these big Grand Prix, these big tournaments. So yeah, I was super in the Pride back in the day, and I used to download highlight videos from LimeWire and watch them on repeat. I've probably still got them on my computer with a load of viruses somewhere, but yeah, that's how I got interested in MMA. And as you rightly said, originally I was interested in competing in MMA myself, and then as time went on, I got more and more into jiu-jitsu and didn't want to do MMA, and then I got to an age where I thought, only stupid people do MMA. No offense to anyone who does MMA, but I wasn't looking to get punched in the head for a living. Not
Right.
up my street.
But
do you?
Sorry.
I was going to say, do you ever regret not having that chance? I mean, I agree with the not
MMA?
getting punched in the head. Yeah, I've come to that conclusion in the past year that I'm like, oh, everyone else came to this conclusion years before me that getting punched in the head's not a good idea. I also have, but I'm also glad that I did it in the first place.
No. I have no regrets for not competing in MMA. The more I'm involved in MMA, the more I'm sort of glad with my decision not to. It's just not for me. I see what these guys go through. I sort of, as you get older, you start to respect your health more. And when you're young, you think that you're invincible, and it's almost a matter of pride to get punched in the head. You want to get punched in the head because that's how tough and how hard you are. But the reality is that getting punched in the head messes you up, and I don't want to get messed up. And I'm glad I never got punched in the head that much.
You didn't always have that attitude to health being the sort of same importance on health, though, did you? You used to wear it as a bit of a badge of pride, getting all beat up in jiu-jitsu, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. You've listened to some other podcasts I've been on. Yeah, absolutely. I speak about this. I spoke about this quite a lot recently. About how I feel that jiu-jitsu has a cultural issue with taking pride in being injured. I think for professional athletes and really high-level athletes, there's a certain amount of inevitability with that, where you can't, longevity and high performance do not go hand in hand. It's a sad reality, actually, that very often to perform on the highest level, the sacrifice that you make is that you don't have a very long or functional life, one or the other, or either. You either die young or you are pretty much crippled. You watch some guys. A great example, for example, is like watching Ronnie Coleman and how messed up he is, and double hip replacements and huge back surgeries. And this is the price that you pay. And I think when you're young, you don't think about what you're going to be like when you're 40 or 50. And then as you get closer, as you hurtle closer towards that age, you start to respect it a little bit more. And, I kind of understand it for a Ronnie Coleman. You got to go with Ronnie Coleman. You go, you know what? You're mangled. You are messed up. The quality of your life from now on is going to be very, very low. But at least you'll go down in history as a legend. Maybe that sacrifice was worth it. But for a hobbyist practitioner, that's not worth it. There's no glory really in any of that stuff. So, I think that there's this balance between performance and health or longevity and functionality of your body. And if you want to be a high performer, which I do, but at the same time, I want to be high performing without sacrificing too much of my health. And then there'll be people who actually don't care about performing to a physical standard that I want to perform to, who actually should prioritize the health even more. And there'll be some people who should prioritize the health significantly more than they prioritize their performance. These are your hobbyist guys, your older guys, the guys who are never gonna, they're never gonna do anything other than doing martial arts or jiu-jitsu or grappling or whatever, just for the love of it. And if you're doing it for the love of it, then make sure that you can do it until you're old.
What about going back into your chronological progression? Like how did you decide to become a competitor actually in the first place? Was there a slow progression of competing at lower belts, and eventually you're like, yeah, this is kind of the thing that I want to do? Or was it more of a conscious decision that I'm going to become a professional jiu-jitsu athlete, let's say?
Yeah, I think when it comes to jiu-jitsu, when we talk about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we talk about grappling. We're talking about a sport. We're talking about something that is designed, and this is very different from how it was designed originally when it was done by the Gracies back in Brazil in the late 80s and 90s, where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu first came out, or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu at the time first came out of Brazil. It was a self-defense, very highly based self-defense. And it was for fighting on the street. It was for fighting in Vale Tudo, or what would become MMA. And there were some elements of the pure sport of Jiu-Jitsu. It's very different now. For me personally, and there's still some guys with an old school attitude, and I totally respect it. Because there'll be some people out there who are interested in it, but I don't care about self-defense really. That's it's just not something that concerns me. Maybe I've never had issues with it. I feel like I could handle myself on the street with my sport jiu-jitsu skills just plenty fine. I've been lucky that I've not had to test that theory, but I don't care about self-defense. I don't care about any of that other stuff. We do a sport, and when you do sports, you compete in them. That's how it works. So I think anyone who does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they don't ever compete, I think that they're doing a very small part of it. I think it's very important to, I was speaking to a guy today who was asking me about affiliating under me, and I'm very particular with who I agree to work with. I don't charge any money for my affiliates, so it's very relationship based, and it's very mutually beneficial for both of us, because they're not just a paycheck like it is for a lot of other people. So I've had 7 or 8 people approach me to be affiliated under me, and I only have 1 at the moment. So I'm very, very particular. And one of the questions that I asked the guy that I was speaking to today, and something that I've asked people in the past, but in both these occasions there were brown belts, and I said, have you competed? And they said no. I go, I'm probably not going to give you a black belt if you don't compete. And it's as simple as that.
Hmm.
I will, is that a rule that I'm 100%, willing to, never willing to compromise on? Not necessarily. I think there are mitigating circumstances. But if you're a brown belt and you haven't competed ever, or if you're a brown belt and you haven't competed since blue belt or white belt, I'm probably not going to give you a black belt. I think that it's really, really important for me, as when someone wants to affiliate with me, that I need to make sure that our philosophies match up really, really. We're aligned on our philosophy of training and jiu-jitsu and grappling in general, and competition's a big part of that. So I'm completely off topic on what you actually asked me, but I'm just trying to emphasize that
That's
competition
really
is
interesting.
competition is something that is, and it's just because I was having the conversation today and it made me think about it. And competition is something that comes very natural, is just part of my ingrained belief of what grappling is. So in terms of my own personal journey, I started competing because, and I think that comes down from Nick. Nick was a competitor. He was an amateur boxer who had many boxing matches beforehand. He was a very avid competitor. A lot of people who were kind of new to the game. There was a point of time where actually Nick Brooks was one of the top guys in the country in terms of competition. He was flying out to Brazil every year. He was competing in the Europeans in Lisbon every year before it was such a big tournament that everyone goes to. And he instilled the philosophy about the importance of competition in me from a very early age and a very early training age, early on in my training. So yeah, I was competing from very early on. And, in terms of how that, you mentioned as well, when did I realize that I wanted to do it full time? Well, when you're 14, 15, 16 years old and you're training jiu-jitsu and you love it, you don't want to do anything else. You go, I want to do this full time. And you got to compete. There are very few people out there who manage to make a career or a living out of jiu-jitsu without competing. Interestingly enough, of course, not because you get paid to compete, because you kind of don't. Very, 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 very few people in the world can compete, can make enough money to live purely from competition. But of course, what competing does is it gets your name out there and it gets your brand out there and it gets people interested in training with you, and that's how you leverage an income. So the competition came very natural, and it's always a step up, step up, step up. It's a natural progression. But yeah, it kind of just it was all very organic.
Well, I think the thing about that, even those people who don't compete, they still usually need someone underneath them to compete for them. I mean, the most obvious one is Danaher, of course, because he's not competed himself, but has obviously developed those techniques himself, and then other people have gone out to demonstrate them. I think that it's part of just showing that what you're doing is legit.
Yeah, I think Danaher is almost the exception that proves the rule. There are I say that there aren't many Danahers out there. Danaher is an outlier, very much an outlier in how jiu-jitsu's worked, and the right place at the right time, working with the right people, working with some of the best guys in one of the best gyms in the world, and working with MMA fighters that originally got his profile very high, and then being at Renzo Gracie Academy, where he was kind of in a way gifted these incredible athletes who wanted to put in so much work and effort that he could develop into great grapplers. So you're taking a look. If you want to do jiu-jitsu full time, you're taking a big risk in life, in general, because it's tough. But if you want to try and do jiu-jitsu full time without ever stepping on the mats to compete, then good luck to you, because that does not happen very much for a lot of people. There are very, very few people that can make that work for them. But yeah, you're right. If you can't when you compete from a sort of a business or a branding or an exposure perspective, what you're doing when you compete as an individual is you're exposing eyes to your brand of jiu-jitsu, and you're getting people to be interested in what you have potentially to teach. That's not to say, people sometimes think that a great competitor always makes for a great coach, which isn't the case a lot of the time, but sometimes it does. But yeah, so you're right. If you're not going to compete yourself, then how are anyone going to, be interested in your jiu-jitsu? Then you'll need someone to compete for you and represent you. But the question is, how are those people going to start training with you in the first place if you don't have any exposure or anything like that? So definitely a much, much harder route to travel down if you don't want to compete and you want to teach jiu-jitsu full time, but not impossible.
And regarding yourself, I mean, competition seems like you said that if you're not doing competition, you're only doing a smaller part of jiu-jitsu. Obviously, at some point, you are going to have to stop competing. I mean, it's a sad truth that we all are.
Yeah.
Are you going to be as motivated then? Is there what will your thoughts on jiu-jitsu be at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to clarify sort of the what you're referring to from what I said. I don't think that competing regularly is a necessity. I think it is important to have competed. I think that it could be one time, it could be once a year, it could be 5 times, or it could be loads and loads of times. I don't think it's necessarily vital to the grappling or jiu-jitsu experience to always be competing, even though for me, that's where I am right now. That's where, back when I was teaching full-time at Mill Hill, I, on a couple of occasions when I had a big class around me, I said, hands up if you are either compete regularly, want to compete in the future. Basically hands up if you consider yourself a competitor, either currently or you want to be. And almost every single person in the room put their hand up. And that is not very common for a lot of places that you go to, but that was the mentality that I bred. That was the way that I, your sort of the cliche saying, your vibe attracts your tribe. And that was my vibe and that was my tribe. I was a competitor and I was training people in a competitive way. So the people that navigated their way towards me were people who always also wanted to compete. That's not to say that it's necessary to do that all the time, not at all. And I don't think that the jiu-jitsu experience as a whole is any less valuable if you don't compete regularly. But I think if you have never competed, I think that you haven't done jiu-jitsu properly. Honestly, I believe that. And that's an opinion that I hold now, and it's a very strong opinion, but or maybe not strong opinion, but an extreme opinion. It may be something that I could change my mind in the future when I'm older and not competing, and I maybe understand what some of these other guys are talking about when they say they don't want to compete. But I believe, people don't want to compete because it's a horrible experience a lot of the time. For some people, it's a much more horrible experience than others. For some people, it's pretty much the worst experience that they could ever imagine in their life. Some people suffer very, very badly with competition nerves or anxiety, and it's a horrible, unpleasant experience. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I think that it's important to, when it comes to, like I said earlier, that I wouldn't give a black belt to someone who hasn't competed. I believe in that. And the reason why I believe in that so strongly is because how could you talk to someone who wanted to compete? How could you speak to them from a place of wisdom and a place of experience and understanding? How could you console their nerves when you haven't done that thing? And that's what it comes down to. I lead from the front when I compete. One of my favorite competitions I ever did in my life was the English Open. I think it was 2017 or 18 when I won weight and absolute at the English. And I went there, and the reason it was my favorite competition was because I won weight and absolute with all subs, which is great. But the fact why I loved it so much is because I had all of my team with me, all competing, and we really went together. And I was able to, usually leading from the front is training with the guys and competing on a Polaris or a big show and having those guys come and watch and then taking them to another tournament. On the occasions when I've been able to compete alongside my team, that is the greatest feeling because I truly feel like we're all there together and I'm leading from the front. And that's the sort of mentality that I want from my affiliates, because that, there are plenty of people out there who don't share this same opinion with me. And maybe they're going to be better suited for looking after your gym. But I believe that if you haven't competed, then you can't deal with, and again, we go back and we talk about Danaher, and we go, well, Danaher's doing a pretty good job talking to his competitors. He is such an outlier that it's sort of a complete exception to the rule, and it kind of doesn't count at all. You've got to take him out of the equation. Whenever you're looking at data, when you have a huge anomaly in any place, you take the anomaly out, because if there isn't a pattern of lots of those data points close to each other, the anomalies have to be disregarded, and he's someone who has to be disregarded. It's of my personal opinion on these on these gyms who don't have a Henzo Gracie on the lead, or a big team of Gracies and loads of experienced competitors and all of these other guys that could be leading them and helping them when it comes to what it's like to compete. When you're a small gym, a local gym in the UK, it's a really, really important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a controversial opinion. I think it does make sense, and I think a lot of people would give the Danaher argument, but it's absolutely right that he's such an anomaly. Maybe, I don't know, maybe his good good view of philosophy is like of big help when he talks to people about how he speaks to his athletes about competition. But again, it's such a outlier that it's hard to justify not doing it. It totally makes sense that if you want to teach someone, you want to have people under you that you have done it yourself.
We did a podcast a while ago talking about, does a coach need to have competed, and we were more focused on MMA at the time. We spoke about Jackson Wink, the fact that neither of those guys have competed in MMA. We kind of came to the conclusion that it's more about sort of understanding what your athletes are going through, and the best way to do that is to compete. But I guess there are always ways to get to that mindset without having done it firsthand.
Yeah, there is, and I think that, again, you're talking about when you're talking about MMA in general, and you're talking about these big gyms, and you could make the similar argument for Danaher and Henzo's and stuff like that. You're talking about professional MMA academies. For the most part, in MMA, coaches often haven't competed, although sometimes they do come from a competing background. And there's certainly going to be a different relationship. But when you train in a big professional MMA gym, you are going to be surrounded by highly experienced people. You're going to be surrounded by people who fight, surrounded by people who know from experience what it's like to compete on the highest level. When you're in a small local jiu-jitsu academy in the UK, there's a good chance that the most experienced person that you're going to have on the mat is going to be the instructors. And for that reason, I think it's more important for them to have gone through the experience. So I think MMA is slightly different with that, because here's the big difference between MMA and jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu's easy. Everyone can do it. Everyone can compete. I've seen videos. I've watched people. I've been to Brazil. In Brazil, you go and watch these 7 Dan, 60, 70-year-old men competing in the Tijuca Tennis Club. And you go, you know what? So you're 37, you're banged up a little bit. You get a bit nervous before you compete. It's a grappling tournament. I don't care if you go. Yeah, exactly. I don't care if you go, you shake hands with your opponent and you get tapped out in 15 seconds. I really don't care about what happens, and it's not about winning. It's not about proving yourself. If we're talking about in the context of you're a brown belt and I'm not going to give you a black belt until you compete, I don't want you to go and win the British Open at brown belt to prove to me that you're that level, because I will consider you black belt level whether you compete or not. This is completely irrespective. You might be a much higher level and not win a tournament. You might be a much lower level and win a tournament. Neither of these things are going to have any play any factor into whether I grade you or not. I don't care if you go there and you get your ass kicked 10 times over in a round robin format. The fact is that you've gone out there and you've done it and you've put it on the line, and that's what's important to me. And there's no excuse to not compete in grappling, in my opinion. In very, very, very rare circumstances where you have a reason not to compete, but they're very rare. Whereas in MMA, every single person alive has a reason not to want to do MMA. That is a dangerous sport where you can get hurt. You don't play around in MMA. That's serious. So I think holding coaches in MMA and grappling to a different standard when it comes to competing is very important.
Yeah, I mean, we know someone, a friend of the podcast that recently fought, and I think it was like maybe his second pro fight, and he had a fractured skull, broken nose, and this is at a pretty low level. You know, it's you might know the organization. It's Golden Ticket Fight Promotions.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's like, you know, it's not exactly the UFC, it's not even Bellator, and you can get hurt to that level. So it totally,
Let me tell
totally
you.
right what you're
Let me tell
saying.
you something. When it comes to MMA, the level that you're competing at is completely irrelevant. Getting kicked in the head is getting kicked in the head. Whether you get kicked in the head in front of a crowd of 20,000 people on pay-per-view, or whether you get kicked in the head in front of 15 people in a nightclub, and on the prelims of a tiny local show, getting kicked in the head will give you brain damage all the same. So yeah, man, you know, and it's something that I learn more and more at the moment, because I've been commentating for Cage Warriors for the last couple of years, and we've done loads of shows. And man, I've seen people get kicked in the head, and they've lost you know, they've lost a day like that. And I mean, they don't remember getting on the plane, they don't remember waking up in the morning, they don't remember anything.
Yeah,
And
that's scary.
it makes you go, yeah, this isn't playing around. That doesn't happen in grappling.
Do you have maybe do you have almost like more respect for those people that they go through that, or like what is your sort of view on it? Because I don't know what to think. I don't know if I have respect or not for people taking that amount of risk.
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I do respect the guys, and I've always
You have to respect the work for sure.
I've always respected people that would step into the cage and do this. You know, I guess when it comes to, you got to ask yourself, are these people doing it because they understand the risk involved and they're doing it anyway, or are they doing it because they don't know what the risks are involved in the first place? But yeah, my respect for anyone, honestly, my respect for anyone that will step on the mat in any, or step in the cage, on the mat, in the ring, anyone who competes in any combat sport has my respect. People who compete in a combat sport where you can really get hurt, such as boxing and kickboxing, Muay Thai and MMA, they have a huge amount of respect from me, because there's not a lot of people out there who can go through that and do it. So absolutely.
Sorry, Robbie, go ahead.
No, go on, Alex.
I was just going to ask, because we've been talking a lot about competitions, and you kind of mentioned that one of your favorite competitions was during the English Open when you had your team around and so on. Like, what actually is your favorite format? Because you're Polaris veteran, and so on. So like you commentate there also. What is your sort of favorite competition format? Is it actually the classic way, you know, like IBJJF type tournament, or?
Yeah, I've competed on all sorts, from crazy formats that don't even exist anymore in the very early days of grappling to, you know, I've done EBI,
Quintet even,
I've done quintet, I've done squads, I've done IBJJF, I've done ADCC. Yeah, I've pretty much done them all. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know what my favorite format is. I can tell you when I had the best time. Quintet was really awesome. I really enjoyed. You know what? It's a funny one with with all of these different formats, and I think this is the reality. I don't think there is necessarily a best format. I think it comes down to the matchmaking. It comes down to the event. I've had I had a quintet event where I loved it and it was the best event of my life, and I had another quintet event where I really hated the rule set and I had a really short match because of the weight difference, and that was it, me done for the day. I have done EBI at EBI, where the opponent just kind of gamed the system and was able to beat me on overtime, even though I trashed him during the main part of the match because he played it smarter. And then I've had EBI overtime where I've won EBI overtime, and then I've done ADCC where the rules are played against me, and I've done ADCC where the rules are played for me, and IBJJF where the rules, every single format there is, I've had matches where the format has been, oh, this is amazing, this is great, and then matches where that format has worked against me. So I think that the format actually matters less than people think. What I don't like is when a format becomes stagnant, and you have an individual who's able to use gamesmanship and understanding of a combination of an understanding of the rules to a deep enough level, and then the willingness to sort of take advantage of some of the potential loopholes in a rule set in order to get a potential advantage over their opponent. But again, that comes down to the individual. You'll have plenty of people who won't do that, and then you'll have people who will do that. So to answer your question, as I answer most questions without giving a very straight answer, I think all formats had their place. I'll tell you what the best format is. The best format is going to be the chess grappling format that I'm going to be running next year.
Yeah, you're doing that.
Is that the next
Oh, yeah,
Kleos?
100%. So, talking about formats in Kleos, I'm chess grappling is something that I came up with recently, but I'm definitely going to do. Kleos, we are going, or something I've wanted to do for ages. I think I've spoken about it on my podcast. I've spoken about it on a few other podcasts. Why not speak about it on this podcast? Because I think we're actually going to do it. I don't know if it's going to be the first Kleos event back, even though we are going to do Kleos again. It might be the second Kleos event back, but I've always wanted to mess around with the formats, because what tends to happen, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 16 years now, and you'll have a format that works, and then everyone copies that format, and then another exciting format will come on, or EBI overtime. There was a 2-year period where everyone was doing EBI overtime, and then Quintet came out and everyone was doing Quintet format. I don't want to copy someone else's format. I want to come with some crazy new format that makes people, that doesn't give people a chance to think and game the system, and then before they've thought about it, it's time to change the format again. So as well as running the regular Kleos competitions, we're going to be running at Kleos Concepts, which is just going to be some crazy new formats. The first one, and one that I'm really excited about doing, I'm not sure if you've heard me talk about it before, is a format called the Big 15. Have you heard about this?
This
The
is
Big
new.
15. This is going to be, I'm telling you, it's going to be fun, because I don't care about anything else. I just want to make it fun, especially at Kleos. It's all about having fun. We're going to do Kleos Concepts, the Big 15. The 15 is the number of points that you can get if you do every position in grappling. Okay. So 3 points for a guard pass,
Okay,
4
right.
points for mount, 4 points for back. Sweep or takedown we're counting as one thing, and then knee on belly as well. If you add all of those up, you get 15. So basically, it's going to be a regular match where you can score these points in a regular format, but you can only score them once. And if you score the Big 15, if you get all 15 points, then that is it. Game over. That counts as a submission, and there's confetti and fireworks and air horns and stuff like that. So I think it will be a really cool format. So that's just something we're going to play around with, because grappling, you spoke about Bruce Lee earlier, and sort of one of the quotes about you pour water into a jar and it becomes the jar, you pour it into a vase and it becomes a vase, and stuff like that. And I think grappling's the same. You pour grappling into a format and it molds and it does that format in this way, and you pour grappling into another format, you pour it into EBI and it looks like this, you pour it into sub only, no time limit, it looks like this, you pour it into IBJJF, it looks like that. And the beauty of grappling is that grappling will prevail, and grappling will look slightly different, but it will still be a form of grappling. So why not tinker around with the shape of the container that you can pour it into? So that's what we're going to do.
This is one of the things I thought is the big strength of Jiu-Jitsu, and actually the fact that it's not got a unified governing body is the fact that, I mean, Jiu-Jitsu is not the IBJJF rule set. Jiu-Jitsu is grappling with submissions with a focus on the ground. I guess that's the only way I would describe it. I always find it, and I like the fact that people can come up with their own crazy rule sets and different point scoring. And, I like the fact that Naga is different to IBJJF, and then grappling industries decide to throw in reaps and leg locks and stuff. I think it's a massive strength of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is certainly something that we've seen more over the last 5, 6, 7 years. The IBJJF did certainly have a much bigger stranglehold on jiu-jitsu, and it was what would happen in the IBJJF would affect how people trained. That's what you don't want to happen, but it's going to be very natural. Whatever is the biggest organization is how people are going to train, and they're going to train for that rule set. And there will be gyms that will train with IBJJF rules, and there'll be gyms that will train for different rules. And the sort of emergence of no gi and the increase in popularity of no gi versus the gi over the past 5 or 6, 7 years means that the IBJJF have sort of lost that monopoly of the rules. There would be a time where every single tournament that you'd ever go to would be IBJJF rules with no exceptions. Maybe an ADCC trials or something would be the exception. Now there's a huge split between especially no gi. In the gi, for the most part, things are going to be IBJJF rules, but especially no gi, we have so many different formats of rules that it's really, really great. So I agree with you. I think it's great that we have all of these different things for people that because it keeps the sport able to evolve and be free. Look at what's happened to judo by by judo having all of its controlled by the IOC, means that they make huge changes to the rules that may not be for the better. So I'm glad that we, even if we do, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a governing body as long as there's still people free to frolic in the in the creative space outside of that as well.
Yeah, we've bashed the judo changes from the Olympics quite a few times, so I think we should probably not do that again because we've just spent a lot of time doing that at this point. Maybe just to bring it back to the chronological order that we've just completely disregarded at this point. I was interested about what your thoughts were on. I mean, obviously, how old were you when you got to the when you did the ADCC trials and won?
I qualified for the ADCC trials age 20.
It's pretty young. I mean, what were your thoughts on it at the time? I mean, that's as a Brit, especially, that's huge.
Yeah, I believe that I was, and I may be mistaken, but I believe that I was the first ever Brit to qualify for the ADCC. I don't think I was the first ever Brit to compete in ADCC, worlds in the finals. But I believe that I was the first ever to qualify. But I might be wrong on that. But that was in 2011 that I qualified. In 2011 that I competed, qualified as a purple belt and competed as a brown belt. Yeah, it was awesome. The ADCC was something that is, for someone who's really interested in no-gi, that is even if you're not, it's this crazy thing with the ADCC where the IBJJF, the worlds are massive, the mundials are massive, world no-gi, Pan Ams, all of Europeans, these are all the biggest tournaments. And then you have ADCC, which is just, it's in another level. It is the Olympics of grappling. It is the Olympics of grappling. So, to qualify for that when I was 20 years old and compete in that was, it was awesome.
And is that still, I mean, I know that ADCC is still your goal. You're right. I have listened to a few podcasts with you on. I mean, I do kind of wonder though, if that's your goal at the moment, you do see that as such a big thing. Obviously you've had a couple of things like injuries and stuff, but why has that not been a huge focus if it's such an important event to be part of?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that I that I certainly have a regret about. I think when you qualify on your first attempt at that sort of age, you take for granted your ability to get there. So in the years afterwards, obviously since 2011, we've had 13, 15, 17, 19. So there's been 4 events. And all of the dates just happened to land on days that I was doing other things. So I remember one of the European trials landed on this date that I was doing one of my first big commentary jobs for an MMA organization, which would unfortunately go bust, but they had this massive show in Finland. And I just said, I'm going to do this. And then, other events came along. So, for example, it was very unfortunate. The 2017 trials, European trials, whilst I was doing quintet, I thought, this massive show quintet, or I go to the trials and I pick quintet, and I don't regret doing that one. So yeah, it was kind of like that. I did try to qualify for the I went to European trials in 2014, trying to qualify for the 2015 event, and during my second match, I blew my knee out. So that was the end of that run for me. I went back to trials in 2019, and I weighed in at 91 kilos, fully clothed, for the under 99 division, which was just really stupid, and competed against some bigger guys that I wasn't able to defeat. And then, unfortunately, my pec tear squads came 2 weeks before the trials, putting me out of that, which was very, very upsetting. And then kind of to rub salt into the wound, but sort of to take my wound and amputate the entire limb. They have announced the second European trials for the 2020 ADCC, and it falls on the only day of the year that I have already booked, which is my sister's wedding, which I am officiating. So man, when I saw that
Can't
was
really get out of that one.
It's devastating, man. It really is, because
The
I
odds.
think I'm kind of just hoping that ADCC changes the date, maybe, because that really sucks. Or I have to force my sister and her fiance to break up. One of those two things. But yeah, that would be a real shame, because I'd love to. I think that this, I know Mo Jassim, who is running the ADCC. He ran the last one. He's running this one. He said that this is going to be his last one. He's really taken ADCC to the next level, and I think that this event is going to be. I think that there's a good chance that this event will be, from what I hope it isn't. I hope that events continue to be really great, but there's a good chance that this event could be the greatest ADCC that will ever exist. It's the way he's so serious, and he's putting so much work into this, and it's looking quite incredible. When I competed in the ADCC, and the event that I competed in 2011 was in Nottingham, and there was maybe 1,000 people there, if you're lucky. He's going to sell out like 10,000 tickets in this incredible arena, and it's going to be insane. So this is the ADCC that you want to be at, and it's going to be very, very upsetting if I'm unable to get there. And then it's going to be another 2 years, and by the time the next one will come around, I'll be 33. I'll be in my physical peak, hopefully. But if I'm not able to do well at that one, then it's going to start to become a bit of a struggle. So I don't have long left I don't have many. I may have a few years, but I don't have many ADCCs left. So it's very disappointing that I might not be at this one.
And well, I mean, don't want to put too much of a downer on the note, but obviously you've had a number of issues with different injuries. Now, I won't ask you to go through them all, but even the ones you said there, and I know that doesn't cover even some of the major ones, or one major one at least. They've obviously impacted you quite heavily. I mean, has that shaped your outlook on the sport? And I mean, how have you sort of overcome those issues?
Yeah, so I had one of the main issues that kind of messed up a lot of my early to mid 20s was my back injury. I've kind of got that under control now. Just after the AJ fight I had at Polaris 2, I had surgery on my right shoulder for a torn labrum. And that, again, they're just, you recover fine and you heal and it's not an issue, but you have to take time out, and 6 months out of competing is a long period of time, and these add up. And then I was sort of in the best physical condition that I'd ever been in, to be honest with you, because my prioritizing of health and recovery and everything like that. I went into the last squads event with no niggles, with no injuries. So to get injured during that event, and for it to be at a critical time, and for it to have such an impact on everything moving forward is something that I'm still dealing with now. I certainly haven't closed the chapter on my pec injury yet. Hopefully by January, February, that would have happened. But yeah, injuries are a part of they're a part of the sport, unfortunately. You do your best to avoid them. There's some genetic components. I think a big part of it probably I don't think that I am super injury prone, or let's put it this way. I think that I'm injury prone, and I think that I've reduced my likelihood of being injured significantly through physical training and becoming strong. And the gym work that I do has meant that I am no longer injury prone. The reason why I think that I am that I was predisposed to injuries beforehand was due to the fact that I didn't play a lot of sports as a kid. I think that this has a huge factor on your physical readiness
Development.
and your development and your propensity to be injured, and all of that stuff. I think training, wrestling, gymnastics, or stuff like this makes a big difference in your, the people who I know who just never get injured are people who played a lot of sports when they were kids, but then not too much where they got messed up as kids. And it's finding that balance. So I kind of started jiu-jitsu young enough that I never got injured. Then as I moved into my late teens and my early 20s to mid 20s, I was very injury prone. And then through physical training and training more intelligently, I became much less injury prone. And then to be hit with this now is frustrating. But, it's just part of the game, and everyone has to deal with that. For some people, they may get a career-ending injury. So far, touch wood, that hasn't happened to me yet.
I'm curious then, was because we haven't actually talked about your strength training, which is sort of legendary in its own right, and your gym is so awesome. Me and Robbie both have your instructional for sandbag training.
Oh, cool,
so
man.
Not to disrupt this one too much,
No.
I think your gym at home is so pervasive that my mum even had no idea that I knew who you were. Was just like, look at this guy's gym, look at this ridiculous amount of stuff he's got. I was like, oh yeah, if I could know this guy.
Yeah, it is. I'm very proud of that. That's something that has grown. That's like my baby, to be honest with you. I go in there whenever I see someone kind of knocking the weights together or mistreating them, I give them a really stern look, because that's kind of like my baby. I'm very proud of her. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, absolutely, and you should be by all means. But was the move towards strength training, was that something that you've been interested in for a while, even as you progress through your jiu-jitsu journey, or did it actually come out of sort of your injury proneness, as you said, in your 20s?
Yeah, no, great question. So if I first really got into it when I was about 16, 17, so quite young. I read Dinosaur Training, and I was given some advice about physical training. When I was 16 years old and I was competing in adult divisions, I weighed about 60 kilos. I was very small and I was very weak, and it's very frustrating when that happens and all of these big guys beat you up, even though they're worse than you at grappling. So I really just wanted to get bigger and stronger to beat these people up, and I got interested in strength training, and that was sort of I would just train to keep myself in the best shape. It was very much just to supplement my grappling. When I injured my back, I think I kind of feel when I injured my back, I couldn't handle the volume of grappling training that a lot of the highest level athletes were doing. You hear about the Mendes brothers at the time, and the Miao brothers would take over, and but you hear about them training for 6-7 hours a day, and I just couldn't do it. My back couldn't handle it. So what I thought is, if I can't keep up with them in terms of putting the hours on the mat, then maybe I can balance that advantage out by being stronger than them. So that was a big part of what made me lean into the strength training a bit more. And yeah, that's a big part of my life now. I really love it. When I can't do it, I don't, I get upset. I like being strong, and I like and it's a lot of fun, and it keeps everything exciting, and I believe it can improve your performance on the mats as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously quite a large part of your brand now, but
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
what I find interesting is that I feel like there's quite a historical link between grappling, although I suppose that would have been more wrestling than jiu-jitsu, and strength training and grappling. There's quite a historical link between that.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting that you found that quite naturally, and then, but it's weird also that this whole relationship is kind of disintegrated with modern jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
Perhaps it's coming back now.
you're absolutely spot on, and you're almost taking the words out of my mouth. One of the things that I really fell in love with when I first got into strength training was the old time strongmen who were just pre steroids. It was just about training, and they had limited equipment, and grit was very important, and being strong was really important, and they were all wrestlers. So naturally, grappling or wrestling, because that was, wrestling was a primary form of grappling. Wrestling and grappling had this very linked, deep connection with strength training and strongmen. And the reason why that became so disconnected is because of the way that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was branded. The whole marketing angle was that it was the smaller, weaker guy defeating the bigger, stronger guy. That was so, you couldn't, the Gracies couldn't come out. Why did Royce Gracie fight in the UFC? Why didn't Hickson? Because Hickson was jacked, right?
Yeah.
Hickson was a jacked, big, jacked, shredded, and he lifted weights and he trained and he worked out. So even when jiu-jitsu was in its early days, the strength and conditioning side never, it certainly wasn't as widespread and as utilized as it was in a place, in wrestling and stuff, in places that are big for wrestling, such as Russia and America, in Iran and places like that. The wrestling is culturally linked with the strength training, and Americans like to be big and strong, and the Russians are always kettlebells and vodka and lifting weights and being strong. and Iranians had the houses of strength and the clubs, and again, it was all part of the culture of the area. Brazil was very laid back, and the guys would like to look good, but wouldn't necessarily be super strong, athletic guys. So the area that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu developed was a place that was a little bit less, intense strength and conditioning that you might see from Russia or America. So I think that's had something to do with it. I think the fact that the Gracies used this marketing angle of the smaller, weaker guy, even though they were doing strength training the entire time, they couldn't tell anyone that, because that would go directly against their branding. The early Gracies were masters of branding, masters of marketing. So for that reason, you would say to someone, I think that you should lift weights. It's going to be better for you. And they go, oh man, strong people are, and it's not to say that isn't true. Jiu-Jitsu does allow the smaller, better grappler to defeat the bigger, stronger, worse grappler. But guess what? The bigger, stronger, better grappler beats the smaller, weaker, better grappler every day of the week. So, and we are seeing that at the highest level, and it's starting to come back now. And that's part of what I see as my mission a little bit, is to reconnect that physical culture with the physical combat.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting. You've got the brand of jiu-jitsu, which is the anti-strength, and the brand of strength together, and I think the strength training is coming back to jiu-jitsu. I mean, there's more and more things on Fanatics, for example, with videos of strength training. There's the video from Pavel
Tatsugin.
That's the one. That's the Russian
Well
name I didn't want to give a stab. There's that. I mean, there's your own stuff, and there's also people like Grapple Machine and Rob Nittman, who are obviously putting out a lot of material. Now, I am a little conscious of time.
Just crack on. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, look, you mentioned that that's your mission to sort of change the view on strength in jiu-jitsu. Linking to that, I mean, you also said earlier that you've probably only got a couple more ADCCs left in you. Do you know what the goal is after that? Is it related to strength? Is it something else?
Yeah, no, it's It's related to grappling. It's related to jiu-jitsu. I don't actually use the term jiu-jitsu very often. I really use grappling a lot more. That broad term, that's what I consider what I do. I'm a grappler. I'm not a BJJ guy, even though I am a BJJ guy, of course. Yeah, you know, so one of the things that I want to do is get that reconnect between grappling and strength training, because I think that it's something that, you know, they belong together. But my main goal and mission, life mission, is to help grow the sport and increase awareness of the sport, bring more money into the sport. You know, I just feel like I think that we're very early on in the days of jiu-jitsu, and that's what I'd like to do. You know, that's what I'd like my legacy. I can die a happy man if I have helped push the sport that I love in the correct direction in any capacity. In terms of the specifics, you know, I'm 30 now. I'm turning 31 this month. You know, I'm not super old, but I'm not super young. I've got plenty more years of competition, hopefully, in me. Maybe 5 or 6 years at the highest level, perhaps. But we'll have to see how it goes, how technology gets on. Then give me some bionic arms and knees. But you know, my goal really is to continue doing the sort of stuff that I am doing, to increase, you know, again, to try and spread jiu-jitsu and increase awareness to jiu-jitsu and the strength side of it as well. Eventually opening up a gym and using that as a central hub to be able to continue to do what I'm doing at the moment. And then, as well as, you know, more specifically in the short term, in the next couple of years, to do as best I can in the competition scenes as well.
Of course.
Have you ever had any plans of competing in strength based?
Yeah.
Good question. It's not something I've considered it in the past. There was a time where I was doing a lot of strongman, sort of modern contemporary strongman stuff. The gym that I was training at, there was lots of competing strongmen, and I was really holding my own against a lot of them. And I thought about competing in a strongman tournament a few times, but because of my back issues, I couldn't deadlift anything. So every strongman contest would have a deadlift in, and I would lose it every, you know, there'd just be no point me doing it. So I never did it in the end. At the moment, I have no real interest in doing anything like that. You know, the strength stuff itself isn't something that competing in strongman or powerlifting is out of the question. I'm not interested. Competing in strongman, not super interested. I like lifting stones. It's something that I don't have to sacrifice a huge amount of time or effort to prepare for. I'm not competing against other people, or you're just competing against yourself or competing against the stone. So that's sort of in the strength world, that's kind of what my focus is to go and lift the historic stones and achieve those specific strength goals. Maybe in the future I'd try something, maybe post competitive BJJ career, I'd try something like arm wrestling or something like that might be a bit of fun. But yeah, you won't see me competing in any powerlifting meets anytime soon.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe an idea for one of the Kleos events is including some kind of strength feat.
Well, you know, you joke, but well, two things for that. One, I've been wanting to do, I have loads of plans in my head for loads of stuff that I want to do. And, you know, sometimes, you know, if I did everything as soon as I thought about it, I'd have no, you know, it would all be shit. But I have a lot of ideas, and eventually the right time comes out. And, you know, I was on doing Instagram stories today, and someone was asking about something. And, you know, something I've wanted to do for years, for example, was to run a camp, like a seminar weekend camp. And he kind of jogged my memory about it. I'm like, I'm going to do this next year. It's going to be loads of fun. And another thing that I want to do at the next Kleos event is to have a strength challenge at Kleos, just like tucked away at the corner, where, you know, a super heavy hammer, which of course, are you worthy? Can you pick the hammer up? And, you know, people pay £1 to try and pick the hammer up, and if you can pick it up, you get the pot or something like that. You know, just a little bit of fun to add on. But also something that I've always wanted to do is sort of to bring back the classic, you know, the classic Olympiads. You know, obviously back in the day, the original Olympics, you wouldn't have a sprinter and a long jumper and a discus thrower or a javelin thrower. Everyone would compete in all of the events, and the champion would be the person who won all of the events. So, you know, I'd love to run an event where you did, a round of wrestling, a round of submission grappling, 100-meter sprint, a javelin throw, a shot, and doing all of these different things. I think it would be a really cool, different event.
Well, the ancient pentathlon was a lot like that. There's a long jump, except you can use weights with it. There's 100, or there's a run, which isn't measured in meters, so it's a weird distance.
Yeah.
Wrestling, I have a feeling it was discus and javelin. I've always thought that's a really cool combination of bits to put together.
I think it's a lot of fun, and I think, look, I guess you kind of get the gist if you hear me talk about most things, but I'm more interested in making jiu-jitsu fun than I am doing anything else with it. I'm when we run Kleos, we run an event that is light-hearted and easygoing and fun more than anything else. I'm not trying to run the English Open. I'm not trying to run the Europeans. I'm not trying to run a big tournament like that. I leave that to the IBJJF, or I leave that to to Braulio and the British and the Carlson guys and the English. I'll let them do that. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to do stuff that's fun, that's entertaining. I want to run, Mario Kart tournaments and chess grappling and stuff like that. That's what I want to do. That in my opinion is how do you get more people in the sport? Is you make it fun and you do stuff like that.
Are your facial expressions then, when you're refereeing, an active choice in trying to make the sport more entertaining, or is that just you?
No, that's organic. Unfortunately, I just get super involved. There's something about being there where you're just like, oh, a few arm bars ago, and you're like, oh damn, And one thing that I always kind of didn't like. I'm a naturally expressive person anyway, and when it comes to jiu-jitsu, even more so. And one thing that I really don't like about IBJJF tournaments and the any formal tournament is that the referees will stand in their suits. You can't move in your suits anyway. Like, why are these guys wearing suits? They're standing there in their suits and they'll watch it and bow, stop, and stand up and do stuff where, like, I feel you can't see what's going on from there. Someone's got someone in a guillotine. You got to be under the mat. You got to be looking up at their face to see whether they're still alive, and you got to get down there and you got to see the different angles. So, yeah.
I love the videos of wrestling referees. I remember seeing one where the guys they're right on the ground, they're turning around, he's got his head on the floor and he runs along just like.
I love it. so many people send that over to me. So many people.
Oh hell, where do we go from here? I did also want to wonder. I mean, getting back to the strength bit a little bit. Why the stones?
Yeah, the stones was sort of man. The stones are awesome. It doesn't even matter how I got into them, because once I kind of found out about them, there's something magical about them.
There's something quite cultural about them, I think.
So stone lifting is something that every single culture in the entire world would at one point have participated in. These were the original barbells. These were the original implements that people were able to use to make themselves stronger, which is just like fucking awesome to begin with. Like, that humans, before they had dumbbells and barbells, everyone moaning that they don't have the equipment, people used to just lift rocks and just move stuff like that to make themselves stronger. And then all of these different cultures would use these stones for different things. Some would be for and that's sort of the beauty of it, is that you travel around, or you research all of these different stones in all of these different countries and areas. They're not all used for the same thing. The stone in Iceland is used to test how strong you are, and how strong you are would denote what wage you got on the shipping boat, and where you would sit when you're rowing. If you can lift a big stone, you're getting paid the most amount of money and you're doing the most amount of work. And if you can only lift a little stone, you're in the kitchen and you're not getting paid anything. And another stone is connected to a myth. And this story of how essentially the devil has stolen this man's soul, and he agrees that if you can carry this stone around the grave, 100 times, then he'll release his soul, and people go there and they lift this stone and they try and carry it around to help free this man who still hasn't been freed. And then, in Scotland, this stone is connected to this clan. This is the clan that they would use. If you could lift this stone, then you were considered a man and you could join the clan. And this stone would be used to settle arguments, and this stone was used to punish people. And then you go over to Sweden, and many of the stones over there were used to they would call bachelor stones. If you want to marry the farmer's daughter, you got to lift the stone. Or the stone in Scotland, that one of the stones I lifted, the Newton Moor stone, this was a stone that was on an old coffin path, and when they were taking a body to its final resting place, they would stop off and they'd eat cheese and they drink wine and they'd lift the stone to show how strong they are, and they'd do stuff like that to show off to each other. And I've been researching, they have stones in Japan that are they're very often in shrines, and they're connected to spirituality. And you make a wish or you ask a question, and if you lift a stone, then it will come. Sorry, if you lift a stone and it feels lighter than you thought it would be, well, then it will come true. And if it feels heavier than you thought it would be, well, then maybe it won't, and stuff like that. So just like the cultural, spiritual, historical significance of these things is just so cool. And then you get to go there and you get to travel back in time for a minute, where you go put your hands on a stone that is 100 years old or is 500 years old or could even be older. And you've traveled back in time, testing yourself on this implement that was tested on people hundreds of years ago, but also you put your name in the imaginary book of this stone. When you go and lift this stone that was lifted by this legendary strong man and been lifted by all of these other men throughout history, and now it's been lifted by you as well. So there's just something about it which is it's almost intoxicating, and at the same time you get the lift weights as well, so couldn't be cooler.
There is a fascinating comparison then between stones, if they have been used by all cultures in past, and I suppose more folk wrestling than submission grappling, but grappling nonetheless. I mean, wrestling is the oldest sport. Everyone does it in their own way, and it's almost something I wish Jiu-Jitsu had a little more of, since listening to have you listened to the Hero with 1,000 Holds, his podcast?
I know of him. Yeah.
It's something that it's something that I feel Jiu-Jitsu I wish it had more of, this sort of cultural ancient relevance, but it's almost so far away. But nonetheless, I kind of digress.
It does. No. Let me stop you there. Wish no more. We when we participate in grappling, we are in the same way that we are connected through a stone to the past and to everyone who's lifted that stone before us and after us. When we grapple, we are connected to the past as well. Obviously humans don't last as long as stones do, but when you grappling is a style of wrestling. It is connected to all of the folk styles of wrestling. You can follow the lineage of what we do through the Gracies to Muay Thai, to judo, to other martial arts, back to everything, in the same way that we are connected to everything through our common ancestor, single-celled amoeba. We are connected through grappling as well to a common ancestor who also grappled. So even though our particular division, in the same way that humans separated from the family tree, so to speak, of species so many hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, just like we've separated off of that branch of the tree of life, so has Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu separated from the branch of wrestling and grappling throughout all the time and culture, but we are very much still connected. So our particular branch of grappling or wrestling may be very new, maybe only 100 years old, but our lineage goes all the way back to the beginning.
I mean, that is beautifully put.
I'm going to record that, and just every time I feel sad, if there's a lack of culture in Jiu-Jitsu, I'm just going to listen to that again.
Honestly, it's one of the reasons why I love grappling. I do believe, I think that there's I'm aware that I could just be being biased, and I think that grappling's the greatest thing because it's what I do. But you see someone play football, you see someone play tennis, you see someone play golf. these things just do not have that connection to our past, to our history, to our ancestry, through cultures, through the world. I'm not sure if you've read The Last Wrestler or The Last Wrestlers by Marcus Trower, I believe, who very, very sadly passed away relatively recently. He was a UK-based Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, actually, originally started with wrestling, and passed away, I believe, in 2015. And it was very, very, very sad to find that out recently. I was recommended this book. It's absolutely a fantastic book, and I think you should read it. The Last Wrestler or The Last Wrestlers by Marcus Trower, I believe it is. And he searches through the cultural relevance and significance. And he was based down in Brighton. Honestly, check it out; it's wicked. And I read it over lockdown, and I thought I need to get this guy on the podcast. This is awesome. And then found out that he was no longer with us, sadly. But a really, really great book, and a great legacy that he's left behind with that. So you do not think because what we do is 100 years old that we're not connected to everyone else who grapples and wrestles, because we are.
I like that. I mean, I have seen interesting. There's always that very famous Greek statue of the Pancratian wrestlers. It does just go to show that Khabib's revolutionizing MMA grappling at the moment, but it's still not brand new.
Man, I've got I've got my coin that I wear sometimes with that's 2,300 years old coin from ancient Greece that has Heracles doing a guillotine on the Nemean lion. There's nothing new under the sun, brother. That's why I love. I like those old techniques as well, where you can, there's some techniques that you'll see, some stuff that we use today that you'll see on ancient Roman and Greek pottery and stuff like that. And you go, man, we are connected.
I did see. I was in Greece last week, and I did find a relief of a man being guillotined by a centaur.
There you go.
Don't know what the centaur relevance is, but
look, centaurs might have to. If centaurs have to grapple, they're going to grapple just like the rest of us. I mean, it would be slightly different. I think you'd be best off with a rear naked choke, I think, on a centaur.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.